Before you start, Ryan, thank you for the keychain.
Congratulations. 30 years of specialization.
Right. And only 5 with 30 years. It was totally in order. It was Joe Cheshire, Tommy Manning, George Lauren, Locke Clifford, and me. That was part of the initial group. So
very impressive, truly.
That was quite an auspicious group, Evan.
Well, I sent Alice a letter I received from the bar the year before that's on the back of my specialization diploma that says, "Dear Mr. Rawls, only 2 people qualified to take the exam this year. You are one of them, and because there's only 2, we're going to postpone this for a year. But you don't have to pay the fee again next year." I think that was because of all the jury trials I had in the public defender's office for those years. I had probably 60 jury trials in several years. So, we ready, Brian?
We are good to go.
All right. Welcome to the PMBR Cybersecurity Special Committee meeting on May 21st, 2021. And before we begin, we all have a duty under the Ethics Act, and it is the duty of all committee members to avoid conflicts of interest and appearances of conflicts of interest in performing the duties as a member of the PMBR Cybersecurity Special Committee and the North Carolina State Bar. Any member of the committee who's aware of any personal conflicts or appearances thereof with respect to the matters before this committee should disclose those at this meeting. Are there any conflicts or appearances from anybody? Hearing none, we're ready to go, and I hope we can wrap this up in 30 minutes or less today, hopefully. We'll revisit Catherine's and Warren's standard of care, I'm sure, just a little bit, but we'll talk about that at the appropriate time. So the first order of business is the approval of the 13 April 2021 committee meeting minutes. Has everybody had a chance to at least peruse those? And if so, does anybody have any objections, suggestions, modifications, or changes that they wish to put forward? If not, do I hear a motion that the minutes be approved?
I move their approval. They're thorough and accurate.
Right,
second.
All right. All in favor, raise your hand. You know, it's unanimous, so they are approved. Next item is the discussion of the work groups. There are 4 work groups. One's been on the bench for the entire time, but almost ready to come off the bench and be the saviors of any of the perception problems that that might arise. So let's start with just a general discussion. Anybody wants to talk about the work groups draft questions for this self-assessment? I will say at the outset, Walter and I have we've had one pass through our group, and we're working on a second and probably a third. So we're in process. We don't have a finished product yet. I was out of town for the last 10 days, and so I'm just trying to catch back up. But it's on Walter's desk now, and then when Walter finishes his, he'll pass it back to me, and then we'll polish it up and put lipstick on it and make it look pretty.
Yeah, on that issue, I'd ask for tips if anybody else has any. Our topic, just to remind you to do the peer review, is on the office personnel side of it. And Evan and I had talked about focusing references to the rules of professional conduct, because it didn't occur to us that there were any other sort of industry or reference materials that would be appropriate. But if others on the committee know about those, that would be helpful to include. We would appreciate that feedback.
Yeah, I think, Walter, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've got the rules covered pretty much, but just the resources um, that were that were possibly available on this issue. So anybody from any of the other work groups has any suggestions about resources on that, we would appreciate it. As it turns out, I think Walter and I have looked at this, and right now our it looks like we're going to have just the questions and the issues and relate it to the rules of professional conduct without any resource materials at this point. So that's out there. So we got a report from Patrick and his fine group. Did a lot of a lot of winnowing, which I think is good. Does somebody from Patrick's work group want to kind of walk us through what y'all did?
Sure. So Takia, Ted, Alan, and I met, and we went through these questions a few times and tried to look at them from an angle of, first of all, making them into yes or no questions. Most of them were like that. A few needed a little bit of wordsmithing. Overall, we thought the assessment that they had provided was very good and hit the high points that needed to be discussed. When we converted some of the questions to yes or no, that created a little bit of duplication just by virtue of the way that some of them were worded. So we tried to condense that down a little bit. The only item that we were really a little bit unsure about was the very last Roman numeral 5, what do your clients know? And I think we all thought that this was a good thing to have in there as a concept, making sure that people had conversations with their clients when it was necessary. We were a little concerned about the way that it was worded and couldn't really come up with a good wording ourselves that would avoid creating a standard of care in all cases that someone would end up pointing to, realizing that every representation is unique. And in some instances, you may not need to have the language that they mentioned in there, but it probably is a good idea, at least on a case-by-case basis, if cybersecurity is an issue that is relevant to the representation, that you have that conversation. But we didn't really have in the time we spent on it, we did not have a suggested way of wordsmithing that particular question. We're happy to answer any questions about why we did things the way we did. Go ahead.
What do you think about not having yes or no questions, but maybe having a Roman numeral 5 that just speaks broad, just in general terms about having your client in certain situations be aware of possible breaches or problems that might result, and just have a kind of almost a summary or a postscript or even a preamble, as opposed to having a question. What about that?
I'll speak for myself individually and invite everyone else to as well. Yeah, I think that could be a good thing as a preamble or whatnot. I think you will get into similar territory that the ethics committee got into with the social media ethics opinion that was put out there and then withdrawn. And I'm not quite sure what the current status, if that passed in some form or got withdrawn completely. I'm meant to go back and look at that, but where you have people that say, well, all I do are a couple traffic tickets, I get a shuck from someone at the courthouse and go handle their ticket. There's no time to talk to them about cybersecurity. Who cares about it in that situation? I'm not collecting anything. Should I have a duty in all cases to have that conversation right then? So I think we start getting into some scenarios where you don't want to have good advice get lost because people look at edge cases or situations where it doesn't apply. Having a general statement of, making sure that your duty for knowing the risks and benefits of relevant technology, ensure that you are having a conversation with your clients about those as well, would be I think a good general preamble type thing, but maybe not necessarily in every case scenario.
Okay.
Flip side is a cybersecurity person in me says, always have those conversations with everybody and make sure everyone's secure. But practically speaking, for the purposes for which we're writing this, we didn't want people getting hung up on that particular aspect.
Okay, yeah, I hear you on that. So Takia, you want to weigh in on anything?
I think Patrick just basically summed it up. That was kind of the conclusion that we came to, that it was kind of scary, that it could create this standard. And so we were very wary about that. And like I said, I echo what Patrick said.
Judge
Evan.
Cobb? Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to offer, this is, I feel like the conversation, really this issue is something that we see in some ethics opinions. We've got 2011 FEO 6 and 2008 FEO 5 that deal with a lawyer's usage of cloud services, software as a service. And so this might be a good opportunity to point out those ethics opinions. Really, those opinions basically say it's a lawyer's duty to act competently if you're going to use those services. The opinions authorize lawyers to use those types of services, but it's really on the lawyer to figure out, what service are they going to use, make proper and diligent inquiry. And if you're going to use it, ensure that you're using it competently and that you're ensuring confidentiality remains preserved. So I think maybe that's how we just deal with that issue, as more of a reminder to point out the resource that already exists on these topics, to do so, or if you're going to use these, that you do your homework essentially.
I guess I have one question with that too, Brian. Do you, not to put you on the spot here, do you guys still consider RPC 215, the cordless phone technology opinion, to still be relevant? So I can definitely see, and I've spoken about it, saying, yeah, you can draw an analog to today's environment, that if you use cutting edge technology or technologies in general, you need to know what the risks are with those and advise your client if you think there's a chance of someone breaking into it. But I didn't know if you guys still consider that really.
I have not cited RPC 215 anytime recently. Usually I'm talking about the ones that I've referenced for software as a service. But I think I have, I know, personally against CLEs, which I gave one on Friday that referenced this point, that essentially if you're going to use a technology that, and we talked about it this morning as an aside with Warren's subcommittee dealing with a question about artificial intelligence, that if you're going to use something, you need to know what you're using. And there's a lot more that goes into it than just that. That's an overly simplistic sort of answer. But the general notion that, yeah, if I guess there needs to be some sort of inquiry into the confidentiality concerns. And I think the same thing can be said for a variety of different technologies that we use. As far as citing RPC 215 specifically, I will confess I've just pulled it up so I can refresh my recollection of what that says. So yeah, give me a minute here. But generally speaking, yeah, I feel like my advice when people have called about this is and kind of what you said before, it really is dependent upon the type of representation in addition to the technology that you're utilizing. If it's a representation where cybersecurity is of the utmost importance, then yes, I think maybe those conversations need to be had as far as where are you storing this information, what other third party might have access to it. But to impose that upon every lawyer and every representation seems impractical and unnecessary when there's already a general duty of competent representation and preserving confidentiality. I think those broad sort of standards, those broad requirements that exist in the rules are sufficient for everyone. But if anything, it comes down to me to a 1.4b situation, a communications requirement that a lawyer has a duty to talk to the client, to explain the representation, the different considerations to the extent necessary so the client can make informed decisions about the representation. And when you're dealing with a representation where cybersecurity, the data is so incredibly sensitive that the client would want to have input on where it's stored and who could potentially have access and the risks associated therewith, I think those types of things become almost a duty of communication in addition to competent representation, preserving confidentiality, and things of that nature. I don't know
So,
if that was a long-winded bad answer, but that's my
well,
answer.
boil that down, Brian. So what are you saying as it relates to Roman numeral 5 and how we can wordsmith that or format that in a way that does not necessarily include those folks that just do traffic cases, although a lot of the traffic lawyers use these services to get to get leads, I guess, and then follow up on those and as Walter and I talked about earlier, this ransomware attack on the Colonial Pipeline is really is a wake-up call. Anybody can be ransomed at any time, clicking on the wrong thing. And I guess the clients just, I think, need to be at least the lawyers ought to be put on some notice that clients need to be aware of some of the problems and take measures to combat the issues, maybe.
Yeah. For whatever it's worth, I feel like, I'm looking in Roman numeral 2A. The question is, do you know where your confidential data is stored? I almost feel like maybe there's a bit more there as far as, lawyer who's utilizing software as a service, cloud services, storing stuff somewhere other than their office. If they're using someone else's computer, which is what it kind of boils down to, right? It's just some other location. Do you know where it's stored? Have you done your own diligent inquiry? And by diligent, it's kind of a reasonably diligent inquiry, right? It's, I think the question of if you're putting it on some Joe Schmo's cloud service, you need to do a little bit more than using Microsoft's OneDrive. And even understanding OneDrive has a whole bunch of different security levels that you can kind of opt for, particularly if you're a government agency, where you have stuff stored, within the US versus an outside the country server. But I guess maybe just that it's something I'm pulling from some of these presentations that I've given where I'm making the comment that, have you looked into the company? Have you seen what type of security breaches they've had and how they've responded to it? Maybe that can be a little bit pulled out more for that question of, do you know where your confidential data is stored? Have you looked at the company and looked at their responses to breaches? Have you looked at their policies? And then really getting down to the question of what does your client know? I think really that is a case dependent, maybe a representation dependent question of that would be the wordsmithing thing that we'd have to get into. When exactly does some sort of, I think, just consideration trigger? I think when you're dealing with, I don't know, other than to have a very vague, incredibly sensitive information. I think all information is sensitive, but when cybersecurity is really perhaps at the crux of the representation, that may at least trigger another question for the lawyer to say, do I need to talk to my client about what they would desire for the representation and my storage of their data? it's vague, but I think the purpose is to just get the question in someone's head.
Yeah, one of the things I liked about Takia and Judge Cobb and Patrick's really culling this down is trying to simplify this in a way and not make it too complicated, and have it be, like you say, consideration and almost noted, that people ought to consider these things without really getting into complex advice and so forth. So I like the fact that it was simplified.
I see Catherine Fry has her hand up.
Yeah, I was looking through the other notes we had from the last meeting. Under the where's your confidential data stored, it may be worth mentioning almost where is it accidentally stored. So for example, if you have a copier and it scans, that stuff's there. I've found that out. But things like that people may not think of, they use, but they're not realizing that it's storing any of their information. So I didn't know if putting either, I guess, a sub question of, sort of accidental or cross-use items. Like, for example, I take pictures of things with my personal cell phone to remember them. Just some sort of question to get the people thinking about these accidental or not necessarily deliberate places where you may have confidential data and not realize it, or send it on and think it's gone and not realize it's still there.
That's a good point. I know when we switched copiers out, Catherine, we wiped the hard drive before we sent it back. Judge Cobb, you got any wisdom to impart to the group?
No, I think on that Roman numeral 5, there was reference last time to that Colorado Rule 256. I think it was lurking in the background. It's a real issue, but it sounds like we're sort of off of that now, sort of toning it down with a preamble type language, which I could live with. And the rest of the exercise was nothing more than trying to make it as concise and as tight as we could do it. Much like what you just said, Ebron. You don't want a typical lawyer to be overwhelmed when they try to take this thing.
Yes, and that's really, you guys did a great job. So
we had a great keyboarder. Patrick's the best. I told him I'm so glad he was doing the keyboarding, because my forehead would have been full of beads of sweat had I been under that pressure.
Yeah, that's Warren. Yep. Okay, anybody else want to weigh in on Patrick and Takia's and Judge Cobb's work product before we move to Jerry? Mac, you're mighty quiet. You usually have something to say.
I'm having serious internet stability problems this afternoon, but the only thing I would have to say so far is that it scares the heck out of me if I'm supposed to know where my data is stored and be able to explain it.
Yeah, you work for a big law firm, so it's probably spread over multiple platforms.
Yeah, don't forget
Hoping
the vaccine chip. It's storing your data too, man.
Yeah, I'm sort of hoping that my people know is an acceptable answer.
Well, you are your people to the bar.
Well, then you're in trouble.
Anybody else, Ted?
No, I mean, Patrick and Takia and Judge Cobb and I, we think we're pretty much all on the same page. like they said, our biggest thing was to keep it simple, because I'm a stupid one. And so, and so we tried to do that. And the other, I guess, the last section, we just wanted to be sure that it wasn't overbroad, and we just felt like that was I had a big concern. I think the other people on the team had a big concern that it was overbroad as stated. And so, but I thought Brian had a good idea about just citing the current ethical standards that are already in place. So I mean, I think that might be a good way to just point people's attention to the duty that we have without imposing any kind of new duty on.
Anybody else before we move to Jerry and his work group? Jerry, want to weigh in?
Well, I'm sitting here terrified at the word Jerry because I have absolutely no idea what contribution I'm supposed to make today. I assume that perhaps somewhere along the line, our work group was supposed to also do a peer review of someone else's. Is that?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. I don't think that has occurred. We after we submitted the information storage and information storage infrastructure questions, I don't know that our work group has done anything, Evan. I apologize for that. I didn't realize that we were headed in that direction. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's been a crazy time. But yeah, and Walter and I are also running behind a little bit on our group. So yeah, maybe you guys can get together and simplify the and peer review as best you can. And once that product is done and Walter and I get our stuff done, I guess we need to talk about steps forward.
Can I ask you a question, Evan?
Yes, sir.
Which work groups product were we to review?
You were going to review Patrick's original work group product.
Cyber attacks. It's the cyber attacks. And I will resend it, Jerry, to all the members of your work group so you'll have it at your fingertips.
Thank you, Lenore. I am so sorry. If you've sent that previously, it escaped me. Sort of like Jimmy Buffett. And I apologize for that. I guess the Colonial Pipeline folks would certainly be an appropriate topic for that. And I'm equally terrified of cyber attacks. It's as bad as information storage and infrastructure.
Well, it may be a harbinger of things to come in the future. I do know a law firm here in Charlotte. It was in my building who got ransomware, and it was a hassle, and the state bar as well.
They say that we only learn about a mere fraction of the ransomware demands that are paid. So that's really scary.
Yeah, and the ones that I'm aware of have been relatively small. I say relative, not the $5 million, but
that was small to the Koch brothers.
Right, that's true. But in the thousands of dollars to smaller folks.
Right.
So, and people just pay it and move on. All right. Well, Catherine, Warren, and who else is on your work group? Is it
Patty?
Patty, yeah, she couldn't make it today. So you guys took us down the standard of care rabbit hole last time. So any further thoughts from your group, from the two of you?
Well, we all met, I don't know when, but at some point we met. and discuss the use or creation of essentially a preamble to all of these questionnaires. Or you could just say a big fat disclosure. But we talked about what it would look like, giving people, a history on where this comes from. And then we were going to use the disclaimer that's actually in the trustee handbook on the website. We were going to use that as sort of a model to create some language. And so we have a sketch. We don't quite have the preamble ready yet. We want a little more time. We do have I call it a marketing plan, so to speak. I've drafted something and sent it out that sort of goes through where you could really say a 4-month sort of marketing plan, some lead up, what to do during launch and things like that. We've also worked on the name. I don't know what to say about that. We've come up with tons of names, and some of them have been great and some of them very practical. Some of them have been really funny. But so at some point we just need to get together a list of maybe the names we think are the top 10 and send them out and see what people think. One of the things we tried to do is look at this from a vantage point that the cybersecurity piece is the first of what will hopefully be many sort of follow-up self-assessments. And so we're trying to create something that, assuming this project continues, the title will work. One thing I note as far as sort of the marketing plan, I think that arguably we at least need a quarter, a calendar quarter before a sort of lead up before the quote launch of the self-assessment. So for example, if it gets approved or something gets approved in October, I think it would be wise to at least take a quarter to put some pre-launch publicity out there. The other thing I think we should do, maybe even before we get to that point, is once we get maybe just even one questionnaire sort of together or self-assessment, that we handpick a group of 20 to 30 people and let them see it, not bar counselors. Just cherry pick some people and let them see it and give us their feedback. Because we've all been doing this for a long time. And so if someone has never seen this, has no idea what it is, I'd like to have a complete fresh set of eyes to tell us what they like, what they think we should play up more now, or what are the negatives that we're not seeing. And I think that would help sort of refine the questionnaires, and then we could sort of get the marketing plan out there. So that was, I don't know, Warren, if you have anything else, if I've missed anything from our meeting.
Not too much, other than I tasked myself with drafting the preamble. And so the fact that you don't have a draft of it yet is on me. But it won't be too complicated. I mean, it's, and to the standard of care issue that we discussed some last time. I think I talked to Brian, and then Catherine and Patty and I talked, and I'm, in my mind, I think we want to get away from making it look like this is anything like a standard of care thing, right, with anything about whether it's confidential or not. I mean, that's for the individual lawyer to make the decision about that. And so we can have something in the disclaimer, just, sort of stating that we, this was written and released in October 2021 or January 2022. And that if you're not taking it until January 2023, you may want to make sure you've, done your own research beyond that. But it is, to me, I think we've got some more concrete plans from our end, as far as Catherine and Patty and I, that we'll be able to hit the ground running, I think, once it's developed.
Well, a couple of things on that. I think there are several ways we could go about doing this. And, one is to prepare a PDF for either consideration or a download. One of the other methods, which I'm not in favor of, is to create an electronic platform at the bar where it's stored and people can use it. That would be probably cost prohibitive, but I think that unless anyone disagrees with me, I think that we're headed towards a PDF that just sits for availability and for download and for consideration by lawyers. And I'm going to give Walter some props here because he said to me that your committee doesn't want to do any of the drafting on the substantive stuff. So we're going to try to get you guys a good finished product once we finish these peer reviews and these edits. And once we get the work group stuff together, and I've talked to Walter and Leonore about this, the three of us are going to try to marry it up, make it format consistent and put some lipstick on it and try to give it to you guys in a final polished form for you guys to take it and run with it. So you're not really involved with any of the drafting. So any comments on that? Unless you guys want to do some drafting, Catherine, Warren.
Well, Catherine and I have been talking about y'all behind your back through text, but one of the topics that came up was that there'll need to be a standardization process of all the different parts so that they kind of look alike and it's not a big and you and Walter may be doing that right now as we speak as part of that process, but we'll certainly look at it non-substantively in that manner too, to make that appear as such.
Leonore, you're kind of grinning over there. What's on your mind?
I was just thinking Brian's going to be joining us too in that little finalization.
In fact, Brian, yours was the first name mentioned because of the ethics considerations. Walter, Leonore, and I drafted you on that. So yes, you're definitely in there.
Duly noted.
All right.
I'll be there.
All right. So, well, that's kind of a snapshot of where we are. So just to summarize briefly, Jerry, you guys are going to peer review that and get it out. Walter and I are going to finish our wordsmithing. Then we're going to take the three work groups, and Brian and Leonore and Walter and myself will try to make them consistent and in format and style, and then try to get it over to you guys for you guys to put the preamble in and the disclaimers, as you called it, and hopefully have a finished product by October. So moving forward, Leonore, do we want to set a hard date to meet again or have this work done by a certain date, or do we want to get the work done in later? Because if we don't set a date, you know how it goes. It sits on everybody's desk.
It probably is a good idea to set a date. Since I think the doodle poll works well to get folks availability. I think that worked well. I'd be interested to hear from the committee on timelines.
Are we going to try to do it? I'm sorry, are we going to try to do it before the July meeting or something?
Well, that's what I was going to ask the committee. Does this committee need to meet during the quarterly meeting time? I would think it probably doesn't because its work is sort of tracking along.
It does not, and I'm gonna miss the quarterly meeting anyway. I'll be up in Lake Placid, New York.
Which will be nice. So that week is July 13th. So that's certainly a week to be avoided. What does this group think about either the beginning of July, is that too soon, or the end of July?
I would suggest that we wait until after the quarterly meeting.
Okay, then I will send out a doodle.
They're gonna want to hear some progress, Evan. And the next step is not, the next step is just the peer review, right? Really is the next step. So can we do that before folks feel like, Jerry, you feel like your folks can? And I know Evan's been very kind in taking responsibility for the delay, but it is actually me. His vacation had nothing to do with it. But it would seem to me within a few weeks we can get our internal reviews, and then that may bring up some more discussion about marrying these. We're still a good, pretty good ways, but I think we probably ought to be ready to give some more report to the executive committee about where we are.
You want to try to look at something maybe in the first, second week in June?
You mean July?
Well, actually, if you're looking at doing it before the quarterly meeting, probably 3 weeks, either June 14th, June 21st, or June 28th. And if it's just the peer review, probably June 14th or June 21st, because Cyber Attacks has already completed their review and gotten the feedback and input for the committee. So there's only the review of the Cyber Attacks work and the office staff work that Evan and Walter are conducting. So I would suggest either the week of June 14th or June 21st. And the 21st would give about a month of time to conduct those reviews. And if you go 1 week up, you're looking at 3 weeks.
On our end, Evan, I think we can do that on June 14th or 21st.
Yeah.
Either way.
I'll send out the doodle poll then for some dates. I'll get with you, Evan and Walter, to get your availability. And then from there, we'll send a digested list of dates to everybody else and get another meeting set. And hopefully we can have some written items to review like Cyber Attacks gave. And then when the group meets, you can discuss it as you did today.
Yeah, if it all comes together, I think that perhaps the four of Brian and Leonore and me and Walter can make a first pass at it, perhaps before the quarterly meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see, Judge Hinnant, you haven't weighed in. Anything you want to say?
No. Good job.
What about you, Alice? She's left her desk, I bet.
No, I'm here. I couldn't find my unmute. I would say good job. Can you hear me, Evan? Now?
Oh, I can hear you. I was waiting for more. I was waiting for some wisdom and insight.
I said good job, but I don't know that you heard me say that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Just looking for my unmute button.
All right. Okay. And Colin, you're the last person that's not weighed in on anything.
In the words of Abraham Lincoln, better to be quiet and thought a fool and open your mouth and remove all doubt.
All right. Anything from anybody else? Otherwise, do I hear a motion to adjourn? Second? Yep.
Second.
All right. We're all in favor, raise your hand, and good job, folks. I mean it, really. This is not easy work, really. This is a lot of heavy lifting. So thank you to everybody, and thank you, Leonore. Thank you, Brian, and everybody. Really, this is not easy.
Good job, Evan.
Thank you,
Thanks, y'all.
Evan.